you do you have just a purely love relationship with sex, or is it a love-hate relationship? Or aloha Mavericks from all around the world. My name's Mike Kelly and I'm super excited to bring you yet another episode of Unmapped, a podcast exploring the world through the eyes of remarkable humans on extraordinary journeys. I hang out with pioneers, adventurers and trailblazers from around the planet, hearing their stories and unlocking the lessons learned from a life on and off the beaten path. And just a little bit of housekeeping, if you're enjoying the show, please consider sharing it with your friends, following and reviewing us wherever you listen to it, and check us out on Instagram at UnmappedPod. It would mean the absolute world, and I guess you get to come and hang out, which could be fun. All right, let's get into the show. On this episode of Unmapped, we're speaking with Roxy Fox. Roxy Fox is a sex educator who does most of her work through, get this, Pornhub and also OnlyFans. She has a massive following because the way that she delivers talking about sex and her education is honestly profound. The way that she thinks about sex and her journey through sex has been one of the most interesting adventures that I've ever had the pleasure of unraveling on this show. And it was such an unbelievable opportunity to speak to Roxy, who is one of honestly the world's most experienced people when it comes to educating people around being more mindful with sex, using Tantra and things like that, even going into dominatrix and all this different sorts of things. She is fantastic. She goes into her journey of, into sex work and talks about why she would never do that again, which I found to just be such an interesting conversation. Above all, she's helped me a lot. So she's been my coach through this realm for the last couple of years. And it is such a privilege to be able to bring her wisdom, her philosophical understanding of what sex is and how it can enrich our lives, and also how we can use sex to help enrich other people's lives as well. She's a beautiful human being, and I was just so lucky to be able to have this conversation with her. So without any further ado, please enjoy this wide-ranging, deep, and very, very sexy conversation with Roxy Fox. All right. Roxy, welcome to Unmapped. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I've been chasing this for a while, actually. How are you in the soul?
I'm good. Yeah, I've just gone through a breakup. And I found out I'm pregnant 4 months ago. So there's a lot of, new things happening in my life. And some days are good, some days are bad. But today is a good day. I'm excited. The sun is shining. I'm in Berlin. Yeah, life is good.
Those two things usually go together in a way that can be quite challenging. So I can imagine that if you've woken up feeling good today, that is a good day for you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm distracted, if I'm thinking about other things than my breakup, then everything is fine, really.
Well,
I just have to distract myself.
It's good.
This interview is distracting me.
Very nice. I'm glad I aim to please, and we're going to take a little bit of a trip down memory lane. So hopefully that will keep you in high spirits throughout at least the next hour. Without going down memory lane, though, I just the first question that I wanted to ask is, do you have just a purely love relationship with sex, or is it a love-hate relationship, or a love-confusing relationship, or a love it's all grey and a bit messy and colourful, and sometimes it's black and sometimes it's beautiful red? What is your relationship to sex?
Oh, that's a good question. No one's asked me that question before.
Really? I'm so surprised by that.
Yeah. I think it's mainly a love relationship, even though I understand and have experienced the dark side of sex. the power dynamic that goes in a negative, abusive direction. And yet, I wouldn't say that I have any negative relationship with sex. I still try to see everything in a positive way. And then when I do find the negative or experience the negative, I try to turn it around and maybe teach people about it, or maybe I can learn something about the world, about society, about human beings from that negative experience. But I've never seen sex as something negative.
You don't seem like you have, and I have noticed through following your content and your socials over the last couple of years that you have been able to, I guess, like, what's the transmute? The word is transmute, kind of like both taking your really positive experiences and also your negative experiences and turning it into a way to help other people, which we're going to get into a lot more into the show. When did you realize, like, you say in one of your podcasts that I listen to, you say that you are a highly sexual individual. When did you realize? Do you remember the time and how old you were and where you were of the time when you realized that, one, might have been that you were really into this thing called sex, and two, when you realized that you were way more into it than most people?
Yeah, I was a child when I first realized it, because I started masturbating when I was 3, and not many children masturbate at that age, but some do. And this is something that I found out much later when I was actually teaching English in a kindergarten in Bangkok. And I saw other girls masturbating, and I was like,
What?
oh my God, I'm not the only one that's doing it. Yeah. And the teachers were like, yeah. And actually, one of the Thai teachers, she made me realize what's happening there. She was like, yeah, her parents are divorced. This is why she's doing it. And I was like, interesting, because my parents were divorced. They got divorced when I was 3, when I started masturbating. So that's when I, for the first time in my life, looked up, why do children masturbate? And I found out that it's a soothing thing, that girls
Wow.
or boys want to soothe themselves if they're going through trauma. So this is what was happening with me as well, because my father left at that age. I found this pleasure, and then I got addicted to that pleasure because I just wanted to feel the good in my body and not the bad anymore. And this is not so typical for women. This is more typical for men, I realized later in life as well. Men have that sexuality where they need to masturbate every day, sometimes many times a day. Girls, like, none of the girls that I know are like that. So this is when I, for the first time, realized, okay, there's something different. And then later, I was like a really horny teenager. I thought about sex all the time. I started watching porn really early, as soon as I could, as soon as the internet started. And I had a computer. Yeah, of course, I found pornographic images. It wasn't like now with Pornhub and X videos. But you would find some images online. They would load like really slow. And then I would sit there with 13 and look at those images and masturbate, you know? Yeah, like a boy would do. And then later, when I started having sex, I was actually quite not old, but I was the last one of all of my friends with 16 when I lost my virginity. But when I lost it, I had an orgasm the first time I had sex, even though it was not with a boyfriend. We were both standing, completely wasted. I was bleeding a lot. It was quite violent even, because I developed this edema, like a big swelling of my vagina. Yet I had an orgasm. And from that day on, every time I had sex, I had an orgasm, which is why I became really not addicted, but I wanted more, you know? I loved sex because I had orgasms. And I had this like, this testosterone. I was like a man. I didn't feel any shame or guilt about my body or about feeling pleasure. So yeah, throughout my whole life, I realized I was different.
Okay, so there's actually so many questions that have come out of just that I want to ask. So the first one is, having an orgasm the first time you have sex as a female is definitely not common, and more so it is like this entire process with being comfortable with your body, being comfortable in the process of having sex, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you think that you were able to orgasm the first time you had sex and every time thereafter? Have you been always comfortable in your body in different way? Like have you ever reflected on this?
I think because I started masturbating so early.
When did you have your first actual orgasm?
With 3.
From masturbating? At 3?
Yeah.
Is that
When I started,
possible?
with the clit, of course, a clitoral orgasm. Yeah,
Wow.
because the clit is there, the nerve endings are always there, Yeah, this is why you see children like rubbing themselves on things, because the feeling is there and the orgasm can occur if you rub long enough. So because I masturbated so much, I think I knew my vagina or my vulva really well. I knew exactly what felt good, what I needed to do. The muscles developed. I had a super strong pelvic floor at that point already. And at the same time, I had no shame, no feelings of shame or guilt about my body. I was always quite confident. Of course, I had insecurities about how I looked. I was always very skinny. I never developed boobs. Like, I always wanted to have nice, beautiful breasts. They are fake, obviously. I never had them. I had the body of a 12-year-old when I was 16 and had sex for the first time. But yet, I was confident with that body. I was confident with everything that was given to me. I guess my mother didn't teach me to feel shame. She's not a religious person. I didn't grow up in a religious environment. She's a bit of a feminist. She was like, do whatever you need to do. You'll figure out yourself. Yeah.
That is amazing. I mean, just off the bat, had absolutely no idea that you could have an orgasm before like a certain age where puberty hits. I don't know. Maybe that's like a dude thing.
No,
I don't know.
no. Most boys and girls masturbate before puberty, actually.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. I just had no idea. Wow. Okay. This is a literal sex ed lesson for me. I did not realize that we were going to go 0 to 100 this quickly. This is fantastic. So
He's always like that.
yeah, well, I am too. So I mean, that's the reason I run a podcast about the journeys people go on. I like going deep. Have you had a time, or can you remember maybe either the first time or the most consequential time where you might have been shamed for your sex, like for your high sex drive? And was it from men or women or both?
So my mother did shame me after I started having sex. When I had my first time, and she had to pick me up from hospital, actually, because I told you it all swell. I had to go to hospital.
Oh, wow.
She had to pick me up, and that's when she slut shamed me for the first time. And then I started fucking around a lot after that, because I was like, whoa, this is sex. It's amazing. I want more of it. I slept with quite a few guys within the first 3 weeks of my sexual life. And she realized that because I took them home as well. It was just me and my mom at home. I took them home without any shame. And yeah, she just called me a slut. And I guess she was right. But I don't think that there was anything wrong with it, because I was just exploring and having fun. I was using condoms. I was careful, and I wasn't doing it to get anything from the guy, to push my ego or anything. I did it in the same way as guys did it, because it is fun and it gives me pleasure. So there's nothing wrong with it, I thought to myself. I knew within myself, actually. And that was the only time really that I was slut shamed. I don't remember anything after that in my whole life. I am sure that there's guys out there, girls also, that think that, but I completely block it out. When I see a negative comment on my social media, I directly delete it. It doesn't get to me. I know what I'm doing is right. I know my work is amazing. And I think I'm being slut shamed much less than other women because I present myself, whether it is in like pornographic images or in the sex educational world, in a mindful way, in a conscious way. And that makes a massive difference. Like I'm not what is a slut anyway? But I'm aware of what I'm doing, and I do it with confidence. And I think that makes a difference.
So I've got a little bit to add on to this idea. I mean, there's a couple of questions I want to get to on this idea of slut shaming, and there's a particular podcast that you recorded with yourself about an experience you had in Koh Phangan in Thailand. But I'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to go back to this idea of being addicted to sex, and like now you're talking about being mindful and being conscious around the way that you have sex and you relate to sex, and so even though your entire life is still revolved around sex, and probably more so than when you were 16, do you still feel like you have that like addiction for sex in you, or do you feel like it's matured into something that is more healthy, or probably maybe both? I don't know.
It has matured in a way that I don't let anyone close to me as I did before. I was just fucking whoever I found handsome, or maybe not even that. And at this point, I understand the dynamic of energy exchange when you sleep with someone.
Yeah,
And
it's big.
sleeping with someone that maybe doesn't respect you 100% or doesn't admire you, I think it has negative effects, especially on women, because that energy goes into us. We're letting someone enter our body that might not even respect us. And I think this is not a good thing. This is something that I realized in the last, 5-6 years or so. And slowly, especially also after prostitution and everything. And slowly I started sleeping with less and less people, and I became more selective with who I'm sleeping with. That at this point, I'm not even having sex anymore because I don't want to sleep with anyone that I don't like, that I'm not in love with, that I don't trust. There is that urge to have sex. It's still there, but my mind is like, nah, we're not gonna do that.
That is a massive journey that you've been on with sex. I mean, even just going back to that, going back to the podcast that you did about Koh Phangan, like, and listening to what you're talking about in terms of when you were 16, you literally had to go to hospital when you lost your virginity, and then within 3 weeks you're kind of like running about town on a rampage by the sounds of it. So it sounds like you've had a really interesting and deep journey with regards to sex. I wanted to ask, and this, I had this question down, and it's the perfect time to ask it. Was precipitated by, I think I was listening to your podcast episode about sex work that you do. You've got a few podcast episodes on Spotify, and you actually were talking about the history of sex and the history of women being sexual beings, and how there was a couple of women throughout history who have been revered in their time for, I think Mary Magdalene was one of them, and is Aphrodite, is that even I think that might be a dude, I don't know, I can't remember. But you mentioned two specific women, and the fact that like our culture has changed in the way that we see women who are sexually, I don't want to like, it's not promiscuous, it's just sexually kind of connected to themselves. Why, and like why have you gone so deep into understanding sex philosophically? And I mean, to get to the point where you're kind of like literally studying like women in the past, like that's a real dedication to this sphere of your life. When did you decide to go that deep, and why?
I think I just wanted to understand myself better, and I wanted to understand the world better, and why women are being slut shamed and can't express their sexuality, and why they're being held down. It was just out of interest, I think, and it started when I went into the sex educational direction, when I started my sex blog and everything. that I wanted to learn more about society, and by learning about the past, we can also try and find a way to change the future, even though I think it is going in a good direction in some ways, and other ways it's not going in a good direction. But yeah.
What are the ways it's not going in a good direction? What are the ways you want to see change from here?
I'm not gonna talk about that topic.
Okay.
Because it's
no worries.
a very hot topic at the moment, and I have to be very careful with what I say. And yeah,
Fair enough.
I'm
Let's
not going
go.
to say anything.
Let's go to Kopanyan. You don't have to say anything. Let's go to Kopanyan.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to, okay, so I might just briefly, I actually think there's way more value rather than repeating this story for people to actually go and listen to the podcast that you did. It's literally, if you look up Roxy's Bangin' podcast, it's literally the podcast episode called The Gangbang. And you, spoiler alert. So I want to talk about the very end of that. I think you gave this just amazing description of building up the event and then talking about the event itself or the experience itself. But at the very end, and this is where we come back to this idea of slut shaming. You mentioned that when you were leaving the venue, if we will, that you walked past some of the women that you were with before heading to the venue, and you know that there's people years later still talking about like that night and kind of like the impact. But and you specifically mentioned that you experienced within that day and the days after all layers of vulnerability. Can you tell us about the layers of vulnerability that you experienced and speak into the aftermath a little bit? And like I said, guys, if you want to pause this here, it's only 12 minutes long, go and listen to it. It's actually one of the fucking best 12-minute podcasts I've ever listened to. It's so fascinating. And then come back and listen to Roxy now.
Yes. So that was actually one of the stories that was so extreme that made me start my sex blog, and out of the sex blog everything else developed. Because the experience was so strong, the experience of the gangbang itself, but then also what happened after. And yeah, you said the reaction wasn't quite good. But I also have to say at this point that I was having a gangbang with Israelis. And as much as I love them, and I have many Israeli friends, they are more conservative as many Western people. If I would have had that gangbang in Berlin with German guys or just with people that live in Berlin, the reaction would have been different, I think. So even though those people, they go to Kopangan every year and they love drugs and they love partying, they are from Israel. They are more closed-minded when it comes to sex. There is no sexual education there. The way they have relationships is different. Like, it's completely normal for the guys in Israel to go to prostitutes. It's not normal for the girls to cheat, though. So the man has his wife, and we're talking not about like old, boring people. We're talking about people in our age, that have traveled the world, that seem to be cool. The man will go to prostitutes. It's normal. Everybody knows it. And yeah, the woman just has to play along with that. Which in my mind is really old-fashioned, It's going into polygamy there. Not polyamory, it's polygamy. And it's like... Anyway, so yeah, it was with 3 Israelis, and they are actually used to what happened. This was nothing special or new to them, that whole scenario, but they usually do it with prostitutes. Because when men are used to going to prostitutes, they fulfill these desires, or maybe they will hire one prostitute and they're with their mates, and then, I guess they all share that prostitute. For me, I wasn't a prostitute. I just wanted to have a gangbang. I was just in my like really sexual phase, confident sexual phase, where I was like, I'm going to have sex with 3 guys today. Yeah, so then it happened. And when I left the venue, um, the female friends of those Israelis were sitting there on the balcony. And I know that one of the guys, one of the husbands of those female friends, he popped in every now and then into the venue, into the gangbang situation. So there was jealousy there. Yeah, and they just didn't like it because they haven't seen a woman that just does that, that just takes what she wants, that has this confidence. And I think, yeah, there was just a lot of jealousy, to be honest.
There,
Yeah.
there was a sense from listening to you sort of debrief on your podcast that you both you'd reached a point in your life where you could sort of see from almost a bird's eye view the way that everyone in that situation felt, whether it be the guys, whether it be you, whether it be the women, and just fully had this moment of completely understanding that why the women were saying the things that they were saying about you, and why there was little parts of you that were feeling a bit like, oh, like what? But then there was this overarching part of you that could see all of what was happening and understand for yourself that you had just fulfilled one of your fantasies and that you were feeling extremely powerful in yourself. Is that like, am I on the right track there?
Yeah. I mean, it didn't happen in the moment that I left. It happened slowly after. There was a moment also where I was just crushed and I felt just really bad. Why would those people not find it as amazing as I did? Why would they judge me? I never really understood people judging other people. Like, I understand the concept and I know why they do it, but it's foreign to me. It's strange to me, So then I had to also talk to other people. I had to talk to my friends. I had to do some yoga and meditate to feel powerful again. And yeah, there was a real aftermath where some of the Israeli friends would come to me 1 or 2 weeks later, like a guy that, I don't want to say anything negative, but he's like known to be crazy, to be very addicted to drugs, much, much older than me. He would have never thought that he had a chance with me. And he thought that he maybe would, because to him, I was a prostitute now. I was someone easy because I just had a gangbang there. And he was just like coming to me in the most sleazy way and like touching me and like, oh, maybe we can. And I was like, oh God, what has just happened? Yeah, but this is their view of me had changed in a direction where they thought, oh, I'm easy. I'm a slut. I'm going to just fuck around and fuck anyone.
I think that is a conversation that has to change. Like, for you to go and do something that you really want to do, and just because like you decided to fuck 3 dudes once and that was something that you just really wanted to do, now therefore you're just going to like drop your bikini at like any which way, like any dude, like, or like those guys or anyone. I think that's just so, it's so antiquated, man. Like like the way that, I mean, it's just not like that for dudes. It's just the experience a dude has in the opposite of coming out of like, like an orgy or like with 3 women is just a completely different experience, right?
Yeah. Even though, again, I must say it really depends on the circle that you're finding yourself in, the country where you are, the circle. Like, there are places, there are communities that are way more open-minded and female empowering, and yeah, that just don't slut shame. There is a big community in Berlin, but all over the world, where people express themselves however they want to, and they're being celebrated for that.
Yeah, I mean, one of my best friends, Jess. One of my best friends, Jess, runs a community called the Open Circle here in Sydney, and just like it's a I mean, very much the opposite of that kind of thing. I mean, it's high communication, high kind of value on people expressing their, their desires and what they want, and, kind of working through that with other people in the community in a really, just in a really respectful way. Like, consent is very important, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, it's an open style community, non-monogamous, and it's kind of a really, like, even to watch from the sidelines is just a really interesting, like, phenomenon. Like, I've just never seen so many people communicate in ways that is so healthy in such complex dynamics before. So yeah, it's really cool. I do want to talk. You've mentioned a few things I want to talk about. You've mentioned yoga. You've mentioned mindful sex. You've mentioned sex education. I want to get to that and dedicate a really good part of the end of this interview to what you do and your expertise, and leaving listeners with some really interesting and hopefully useful knowledge for them to take home. But I do want to go into what seems like it was one of the other formative experiences in your journey to this point where you are now, and that was, which you've mentioned, prostitution and sex work. Are you open to going into that a little bit?
Yep.
Tell me about it. Is this one of those things where I've got to ask really specific questions because it's too much to talk about, or are you able to give a little bit of an overview of why you got into it and your perspectives around it and why you came out of it?
At this point, it feels like it's so long ago. It feels
How long ago was it? When was it? Oh, you don't want to say? You don't have to say that. You don't have to say that.
No, I have to count. It's like 4 years ago that I stopped. Or maybe 3.5 years. But in those 3.5 years, I have changed so much that I am thinking, who was that person back then? Like, I don't regret anything, obviously, because of this sex work. I am where I am right now. This whole business exploded because of the sex work, because I started talking honestly and openly about it, which is quite rare. That was also like a healing process for me. But yeah, I was just like in a very different phase of my life. I was taking a lot of cocaine. I was numbing myself. I was going in a really dark direction. And I think also the fact that I had slept with so many men for money that I didn't want to sleep with, it had a negative effect on me energetically.
This was the energy thing you were
on my
talking about
mind,
before.
on my body. So I was a big mess, really. And yeah, I think you have to ask more specific questions. Like, the way I see prostitution is not all positive. I am quite critical of it, actually, because I didn't have any bad experiences, actually. Thank God I never met anyone that was violent or disrespectful. That is also because of how I did it. I was screening the guys I was with. I would always go on a date with them first. They had to take me out to a restaurant, and we would get to know each other. We would have deep conversations, because with me you have deep conversations. I want to go deep. I want to know everything. I want to get to know the psyche of that person. So I could like figure out quite fast whether he was a bad person or an okay person or a good person. And 1 or 2 times I realized, okay, he's like a sexist, he's disrespectful. And then I didn't go further. After the dinner, I was like, hey, I'm sorry, but I can't sleep with you. And that was it. So despite me not having any bad experiences, I realized how bad it is to sleep with someone that you're not really into. Because for me, it was really traumatizing. I'm a really sensitive person, and I also analyze myself maybe more than other people. So when I started crushing, when I started breaking inside, I realized that. And then I stopped. I didn't continue because I care about my body and my mental health a lot. So then I'm looking at other women or other people that are doing it, and I'm thinking they don't have that alarm system within them, where they're like, uh-oh, now we're going too far. This is not good for me. They just continue doing it and they numb themselves with drugs. And yeah, I think it's really dangerous. At the same time, 90% of the men that I was with were in relationships. So they were cheating. It's a game of cheating prostitution, you know. And this is not the kind of relationship that I want to promote either. I think we should be honest with each other. I think you will either be honest and you will find a way to open the relationship up in a way that everyone is satisfied, or you freaking control yourself, because it's also not all about sex and fulfilling that urge and that desire to sleep with someone new, someone different. I think there's also like value in controlling those sexual urges. And sometimes I even think, I know it sounds weird coming out of my mouth, but I sometimes think there is some truth in what religions try to teach us about sex.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please
Because
elaborate.
I have seen how negative it can be to just fuck around and to just give in to your urges. It is negative for yourself because you're not controlling yourself in any way. It is negative for your relationship if that means you're cheating on your partner. It is negative in a way that you might be spreading STDs. There is this big risk, you know, of getting people pregnant, of spreading STDs. So, yeah, and most people just have sex in such an unconscious way. There is nothing even good to it. You just literally, you just ejaculate or you just feed your ego and that's it. There's nothing higher for your soul in that. You know, it's such an animalistic thing that has so many negative consequences that I'm starting to think, I think we should all learn to control our urges a little bit more for the development of human beings, for the growth of human beings, for us to evolve away from animals and to a higher state. I have never worded it like this. This is the first time I'm saying it. I've thought about it many times, but this was the first time I'm saying it.
I think you just worded it very, very well. I think it's, I mean, for one, just, and this is a random anecdote, we don't have to go into it, but it's so interesting. I mean, you hear there's so many, I'll use the word charlatans, of people who are in like the spiritual community in Australia or around the world who are, you know, kind of mixing their kind of teaching people how to be kind of like esoteric or spiritual entrepreneurs with teaching people how to like work with sex. And then, you know, it's clearly all marketing on the front end. It's like, I wonder how many people like that are actually at any in any way on the path of enlightenment, and you know what their work with sex and people that they're teaching how to do this kind of stuff is actually like. Is it, I mean, it just starts to think like, are they just these kind of like self-professed gurus who are using their stature to sort of, you know, like be inappropriate? But the point of the anecdote is you're probably the first person I've ever heard talk about mindfulness and sex in the same breath who I feel like really gets it and embodies it. And I think it's probably a good time to go there too. I mean, so your journey through, and I'll fill in the gap, your journey from sort of like sex work through to where you are now started with an OnlyFans and started with, instead of actually fucking people, like making content and then being able to sort of sell that. If I'm not getting it right, let me know. I listened to your sex work podcast and this is where I got to. And then from there, realizing that you had call it like a niche in that sphere of helping people by making videos that encourage them to be more mindful in the way that they specifically masturbated to start with, and now have moved into more educating people in the way that they perceive and have sex and think about sex and relate to having sex with other people. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you're at in your journey now and what you're doing?
Yeah, so in that journey, you could already see that I've slowly gone into a more and more mindful direction. That is not only because I think it is my destiny to teach people and to help people. I was a yoga teacher for 10 years before all this sex work, and I was truly satisfied with that, just not with the money it made. But actually, even with the little money, I was satisfied for a long time until I had to have my abortion 5 years ago or 6 years ago. While I was diving into sex work, I realized very fast every time when it was damaging for me and when it just didn't make any sense. Like making a masturbation video for OnlyFans didn't make any sense. I wasn't doing anything great for the world. And I wasn't doing anything great for myself either, because I'm giving a very private moment of myself away just to make money. So I was doing that because I wanted the money, but I knew at the same time it wasn't right. It's not my sole purpose, you know?
Why do you feel like it needs to be aligned to your sole purpose?
It should be. It's fine if you're doing something for a moment that is not aligned with your sole purpose, because sometimes it's more important to make money. Sometimes it's more important to have a negative experience also if you're going to learn from it. But at the end of the day, yes, you should do something that you find meaningful, or that is meaningful, that is bringing the world in a good direction, not in a bad direction. This is what I think. Obviously, this is not how the world works. You know, most people don't do what they think is right, and they don't do something that is helping the world. But I think you will be much more satisfied if you do that. And from experience, I know that this is how it works. So I started doing more mindful things slowly but surely. And I stopped doing things that weren't completely aligned with me. And yeah, that's why I am so different now to how I was when I was escorting, or just after I was escorting. You know, when you asked me about it, I was like, who was that person? Like, I don't even
Yeah.
recognize anyone. That is because I started doing things that felt really right and that are good. And that's also when the slut shaming became less and less. And I'm just like in a really beautiful place right now because I am doing what I feel is right. People are asking me to make content and to do things that doesn't align with me, and I'm like, fuck it, no, I don't care, I don't want to do it. They offer a lot of money for it, and I'm like, you know, I've done so much shit for money, I don't care about your money, I don't want your money anymore. Yeah, and that feels right. That gives you a feeling of empowerment as well, saying no to a lot of money because you know it's not right. Whereas before I was thinking it's empowering to get that money. You know, I was like, wow, I'm an escort. I'm making 10,000 a month. It felt empowering at that point. Now, when I look back, I'm like, no, it wasn't empowering because I was doing something that I didn't really want to do. Maybe I was even lying to myself and telling myself it's something that
Yeah.
I want to do just because I wanted the money, easy, fast, not even working for it. You fuck someone one time, £1,500 there, you know?
That is a paradigm shift in the way that you view yourself and your life, to move from feeling like you were empowered because you were making the money to realizing that true empowerment is doing what you love or care about or brings value to the world and not giving a fuck about the money. That is like a 180 shift in your mindset.
Yeah.
How does that
Yeah.
feel?
Must
How
also
does that
say
feel
that
to think that you've done that?
feels amazing. But I
Fuck
must
yeah.
also say that I am making a lot of money with the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, fair
So if
enough.
I say no to an offer, I'm like, I don't need it because I've got it, you know? Yeah, I have to be honest there.
Fair enough. I mean, it's easy to turn down the £1,000 you get for making a video when you've already got the cash rolling in. You know what I mean? Like, it might be a little bit different if you didn't. Fair enough. So tell me.
Real empowerment, then I guess.
So there's things that you won't do, but there's things that you are doing. What are you doing right now that's earning you all this mad dough and is aligned to your sole purpose?
Really beautiful things, actually.
I
It's
know.
either educational videos. So sex educational videos that are explicit. And I don't have a problem with that at all because I never felt shame about my body, you know. I can just like get naked and spread my legs in front of a million people, which I do actually online, but I would do it in person as well, and show them where the clit is and how you make a girl squirt. No problem at all. No shame at all. It's just my body, like, yeah. And so this is one thing that I'm doing, explicit sex education. The other thing is I am, and that's two things actually. I'm teaching people how to masturbate and have sex in a mindful way. So all that knowledge from yoga and tantra that was part of my life before the sex work, I'm combining that with sex and I'm teaching people about that. And I think this is really, really popular. Maybe the most popular thing, how to slow down when you masturbate, how to masturbate in a more mindful and conscious way, how to breathe while you do it, how to get rid of needing pornographic images to come, because porn addiction is a big problem. And I think a lot of my fans are with me because they have a porn addiction or because they have erectile dysfunction because of porn. Yeah, so I'm teaching them that, and then they can translate that into their sex life if they do have sex. And the other thing, and this is something I'm actually, and I've never said that before either. I have to be careful with how I word it, but this is something I'm not so sure about anymore. It's teaching people about the fetish world and giving them a space to explore their kinks. And the beautiful thing about that is that I'm giving people a space where they don't feel judged, which they shouldn't. They shouldn't feel judged. They shouldn't be judged for having a foot fetish or whatever. Absolutely not. But at the same time, I'm analyzing why men have these fetishes. And I'm realizing it's very often coming from something not healthy. It's often related to a trauma. And there is often a power play in there that I don't believe is healthy, whether you are on the dominant or the submissive side.
What if you're a switch?
Huh?
What if you're a switch? I'm
Yeah,
asking for a friend.
that's the healthiest. That's the healthiest, I think.
Oh, wow, okay.
I think we should all be switched. We should be able to explore both. That's the healthy way. And to be with a partner where you can do both is beautiful because you're equal, you know? But if you need to be dominant or if you need to be submissive, I don't think that is healthy. And that opinion comes from knowledge about psychology, and it's also like a deep intuition within me because I've been in that world so much. I've spoken to so many men that are extremely submissive. I've spoken to a few men that are extremely dominant as well, and they are not healthy. It is not healthy. Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't know that you did that with the kink stuff.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so
A dominatrix also.
okay, right.
Yeah, I was a dominatrix.
Okay.
This is know all these things. It's not just like random people. No, it was my job.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Well, we can talk about that perhaps, but I do want to go to something that sticks with the mindfulness and the stuff. I mean, you did say that you're not sure if that's going to be something you continue doing, but this is kind of the future for you. So I wanted to ask a question that's going to be very long-winded because I'm just going to make it about me for a second, in the least narcissistic way possible, and allow you to come back to you and what it is you do in the world from that. So I'm going to talk about how I came across you, which was a couple of years ago. And I've actually got some writing here because I just wanted to make sure I read it out because it's something that's quite vulnerable for me to share about. So for a number of reasons and in a number of different ways across my adult life. Oh, and also, Mum, if you're listening, press pause. Like, I'll just let you know. I'll tell you when you can pop back in, but you should press pause. for a number of reasons and in a number of different ways across my adult life, I've experienced disconnection from my sexual self. After being bullied a lot at school for my inability to talk, I fucking sound like I'm reading, man. I hate this, but I'm reading anyway. After being bullied a lot at school for my inability to talk to women, I found it really hard for a long time to step into my sexual nature outside of the bedroom. And I think that's key. I've never been scared of rejection for a long time, but I was scared of the perception that I wasn't sexual enough. And this is something that I've been speaking to one of my friends about. It's so weird because I don't care if I get rejected. I have no fear around rejection, but it's more the perception that in a space where other people can see me, or like the person that I've made an advance on will, like kind of talk about the fact that I'm not sexual enough or something like that. There's just this thing. It's about not being sexual enough. In the bedroom, I was always completely comfortable and found sex came quite naturally. I would often get the comment that okay, I did not expect that because of how I'm unable to portray myself or unable to exude my sexual nature in public or, outside of the bedroom, but then in it kind of all comes out because I've never been able to embody that in person. I found your work at a time in my life where I'd just been in a destructive relationship that had turned physically abusive towards me. And afterwards, I was unable to be intimate with a woman for a long time. I could do foreplay, but I struggled to have sex. And as someone who's always been quite confident in the space, once I'm in the space, that really fucked me up. And I actually couldn't for a while there have sex without illicit substances, kind of exactly what you were talking about with numbing yourself as when you're in sex work, right? Watching porn became easier as I began to hide and feel shame, and that then led to this kind of downward spiral of a narrative that I was fucked, I was never going to get out of this, et cetera, et cetera. I was in this toxic cycle. I spoke to a therapist of mine who I saw a couple of years ago, and she was also a sexologist, and she was sort of helping me through some of these things. And she mentioned, of all of the things to look into, I don't know why it was, I can't remember the specific of why this was the thing I needed to look into, but she mentioned to look into orgasming without ejaculating. And I'd never heard that before. So I went on to Pornhub and went okay, so what the fuck is this all about? Can I find it anywhere? The first way I knew to find something out like that was Pornhub. I found you through there. I followed that through to your OnlyFans, and I've found that your work with helping people be more mindful and conscious around their sexual lives has helped me immensely, immensely. I mean, it was a completely different experience that I had with my last partner. I'm able to explore and sort of be a lot more myself, and I'm still going through that process at the moment. But it's been an incredibly helpful thing for me to be a part of your community and, kind of using your content to help me be more mindful in the way that I do this, and also build up my, I suppose, not confidence, because it's not actually a confidence thing. It's just a releasing of all the shit that came in from either sort of being at school, a teenage kid, not being able to talk to girls, or having this relationship, a couple of relationships ago that went bad. Can you speak to this inability for people, because this is not just me, and I know that I had it really lucky for a long time and that I was so comfortable. Can you speak to this inability for people to embody their sexual selves, and then what you do specifically within, you've already talked about a little bit, but what you do specifically in this space to help people overcome it? It's really long, but it's a small question. It's just a lot of context.
First of all, I'm really sorry that you have been in this abusive relationship. But I'm also really happy that you found my content and that it had helped you. This is exactly why I'm doing this, and it makes me so happy to hear feedback like that. So the question was,
speaking to the inability of people to embody their sexual selves, why is it that people are like this so often, and the specific kind of things that you do to help them overcome that?
So I have never experienced that myself, but I believe that people are this way because of their upbringing, of course. They grow up in maybe religious households. They grow up with shame. I think this is maybe the number one reason why people feel bad about their sexuality or like they can't express themselves. At the same time, it's also the society that we grow up in. Men have to be a certain way. Women also have to be a certain way. But I think the bigger problem is with men. They have to be like super tough, strong, manly, hypersexual. This is kind of cool. And if you're not like that, and I think that maybe might have happened with you, you feel inadequate, even though you have the sexuality, but you're just not, showing it like this, like a peacock. Or maybe you have some thoughts or some fantasies that are still being judged by society as well. And then you will never express them. You will always hide them. You won't even express them with your partner because you're scared of being judged. So those two things are, I think, the main reasons why people don't express their sexuality or are confident within their sexuality. And then, in some rarer cases.
Just before you get to the solution, I just wanted to open this up. Like, it's not my story, but you can speak to porn addiction within this as well, and how people are sort of like ending up doing that rather than being out in the world. Yeah, I just wanted to clear that up. Yeah, you can go there too.
So in some rarer cases, it can also be trauma or like specific experiences that have happened. But then, sometimes it is the lack of experience at all, of course. Never having sex, never being confident enough to speak to a girl, to ask a girl for the number. This is a massive problem, actually, with young guys. And I don't think we realize how many virgins there are under 30, because people just expect boys to have sex before they're 20 or something. But there's a lot of guys that are addicted to porn. Yeah, porn is a big reason. Or just sit at home and play computer games all day long. They just sit in front of the screen doing whatever, and they don't go out. And because the generation that is growing up now is so used to being in front of the screen, they created this different reality online that they are not confident in the actual reality. And they kind of ignore it a little bit. They don't go out, they don't speak to girls, they don't have sex. They just sit in front of the screen, play computer games, watch porn, get addicted to that, because it is addictive. Every time you have this good experience, every time you see a new image, whether it's scrolling on Instagram or whether it's porn, you get this dopamine kick. And you get addicted to dopamine. That's what cocaine. That's what cocaine is. It's dopamine. Every time you have a line, it's like pure dopamine in your body. So you can compare porn addiction to coke addiction. Actually, it's quite similar. It's also the same as with exercise. It's also dopamine, but it's not as strong and intense as drugs or porn. So then you get addicted. You get addicted to the dopamine. You get addicted to something new very fast all the time. You can't even watch one porn being satisfied. You need to watch something different because it gets boring, because you need a new dopamine kick.
Or multiple tabs at the same time. You can't just have one.
So you can't even watch one porn anymore. And then, because you get used to that, you need something more extreme every time. So this is the problem of a lot of guys, I think. There is so many problems within this. Not only the fact that you need something more extreme every time, or that your attention span can't stay with one porn, but you need many different things. The problem is also that they don't actually go out, or if they do go out and if they are with girls, it doesn't fulfill their expectations. It doesn't fulfill their expectations, because it's not like in porn that you get something exciting all the time. No, it's one person. She probably doesn't look like a porn star. She probably doesn't do the things that you see in porn. You're probably nervous because you rarely have sex because you watch porn all the time. Then you compare yourself with the porn actors. You realize your penis is probably smaller. And yeah, that just leads to erectile dysfunction or not having any sex.
So if you have someone who comes to you, and I don't know if you do, I don't know if you do sort of coaching one to one or if it's mainly through your
No.
content on OnlyFans. And well, and also when I say coaching, I mean like kind of just literally like almost like one to one talking, not like not kind of like not a training session or whatever.
Yeah.
I so how do you how do you help? How do you help with this? What are the things? I mean, you've spoken about explicit kind of like mindful videos. Like, do you want to just talk a little bit more into that and how you feel like what you're doing is helping the individuals as who are part of your community solve that problem for themselves?
Yeah, so I do make those videos where I teach them how to get rid of the porn addiction. So I guide them through their bodies. I resensitize them. I teach them and tell them to masturbate in a less strong way, so a less strong grip. Use different stroking techniques because they probably got used to one specific stroking technique and then they need that also. That is another problem that a lot of guys have. The penetration in the vagina isn't as intense or as good as when they stroke, so they can't come from that. They literally have to pull out and stroke at the end to come. This is a very common problem. It shouldn't be like that. Um, but at the same time, yeah, I don't do one-on-one video calls or anything like that. I wouldn't really have the time for that. And also, I need to keep distance to my fans or students. But I do talk to them. I message them. I write with them. And I often just tell them, look, your homework is to go out. You have to go out. You have to start talking to girls, even if you get rejected. It's extremely important that you get away from the screen, also from me, and also from my platform, and go into the real world. This is the point, that you have a satisfied and fulfilled life away from the screen. So some of the guys are even told to go traveling, to go backpacking, because they've been in their hometown the whole time. They see the same people every day. How are you going to meet someone if you don't actually meet new people and have new interactions? So some of them have actually done it. They quit their jobs and they went backpacking through Thailand because that's what I recommend to everyone. And I love that because that's what I
That's
did when I was
amazing.
19, and it's changed my life. I actually never came back from that trip, from that backpacking trip. So yeah, breaking out of your routine and doing something new, doing something that you're scared of is just as important as watching those mindful videos, maybe even more important, to be honest.
I mean, it's doing those, it's being able to go out and oh, that's amazing. So really what you're the way that you're solving this problem ideally is to just get people to go out and have experiences that may or may not have anything to do with sex and just live life and grow outside of that person that sits there playing video games on a computer watching porn every day, because being out in the world living is where you live. I guess like I mean it's not really much more complicated than that, is
And
it?
you meet different people, you have different conversations, they will open your mind, and then sex will come through that as
Yeah.
well.
And then you start to break out of that loop. You might like have sex with someone and then might feel really awkward, but you just keep trying. And over
Yeah.
time, you build up the sort of like, yeah, cool. That's fascinating that it's almost like it almost has nothing to do with sex. It has nothing to do with sex. You live
No,
your
it
life and then sex
doesn't.
happens. Like, yeah. Um, I like to go into, and I'll throw a shout out to the guys at the open circle, which is my friend Jess's community, and Dan Kiltman. I put a little thing in saying that I was having this conversation with you, and if anyone had any questions, and this is specific to Tantra, but I think in the way that we're talking about teaching people to be more mindful and conscious of the way that they're having sex, I think it becomes a good question to ask. And the question was, what would you this idea that Tantra is spiritual? So there is an idea that Tantra is spiritual. So what would you tell someone with zero spiritual inclinations to convince them that they should try Tantra? And what should that person try first to show them that there are real measurable benefits? And I suppose the way that I think about this is not just thinking about it from the lens of sort of calling it the construct of Tantra, but calling it the construct of why should people be more mindful when they're having sex.
So I think Tantra is also not for everyone, but I think it should be at least tried by everyone, especially by people that think they are not very conscious and very mindful when they have sex or when they masturbate. Now, to want that, to get to that point in life, you have to be there. You cannot just force someone to say, hey, you should be more mindful. No, something should be lacking in your life. You should feel like something isn't right the way they live. Maybe they are not really satisfied anymore with the way they masturbate or the way they have sex. Or maybe they have sex, but they can't really connect to the partner that they're with. For many people, it's going to be like that for all their life, and it's not really a problem, but it's going to be a problem for the relationship that they're having. If they want to have a relationship, if they want to have a meaningful relationship with a partner, and they want to keep being attracted to that partner, it's very important that there is a real connection and that there is intimacy. You can't have connection and intimacy if you're not being mindful while you have sex.
True.
If you have robotic sex, if it's just performance, it's a performance. You're not connected. And that's when people stop being attracted to each other as well. Not attracted to each other anymore in a relationship. Because you will not be as excited about the look anymore after 1 or 2 or 3 years. That's just how we are. But if you are really connected to the person on a soul level, if you feel like this is your soulmate, then you will want to sleep with them, not because they are attractive, but because you are so close to them, you know? And I think this could be like a solution for many people in relationships that stop being attracted to each other, that stop having sex, that feel like, yeah, something is missing. Maybe it's not a different pussy that is missing, but maybe it's the intimacy and the connection to your girlfriend that is missing.
Well said.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
it actually leads quite nicely into, and this will be my last question. It's a long one again, but a lot of context. So just from doing my research prior to this interview, and then also from speaking to you, it has only kind of like taken me further into thinking. I mean, you actually dead set said it. You seem like you've reached this form of purpose zenith, call it. And having gone through the spectrum of sexual experience from being born into a highly sexual body to being open and explorative, an escort, and having an OnlyFans, you've also gone through a range of different styles of sex, call it be tantra, kink, or open, or orgies, or gangbangs. And you've arrived at a point where it seems to me like you've got this really deep, centered, and almost transcendent view of sex and how it can work in your life and how it can work in others' lives. And for you, it's an incredible teacher and a tool to learn about ourselves, to grow and to evolve. And then by viewing the way we as human beings have sex as a way of gifting an experience to another, which allows them to grow. And this is something that you said in your sex work podcast that I absolutely love. Like, being mindful around how you have sex means you can gift this like beautiful experience to another person and share it with them. And I thought that was so beautiful. It reminds me of having a sense of mastery towards an action or a body of knowledge. And you seem deeply aligned and in flow with both sex, whether you're having it or not, and your work. Does this characterization align with you? And when I say that in the space of a minute, how does it feel to you to see that journey is laid out in front of you? You know, does it align with you? And two, like, how does it feel to just think of that? I mean, that's a journey that a lot of people don't have with any sort of body of knowledge or thing in their entire lives. And you've had it with something that is so core to the human experience, which is sex.
it feels true, and it feels really beautiful. Makes me proud of myself somehow, and really happy with my choices, even if they meant going through painful phases in my life. But it also at the same time makes me realize all my knowledge, everything that I teach, everything that I say comes from my own experiences. And then it's true knowledge. Nothing you can read in a book or nothing you can hear in a podcast is going to be real knowledge. And it makes me realize that everyone that is listening and everyone that is following me ideally should have to go through as many experiences as possible themselves. Now, it's very important, and this is what separates me from many people, I think, to have the experience and then step away from it and analyze it and learn from it. Because you can also have a lot of experiences and just stay ignorant in them and make the same mistake again and again until you die. Or you can be aware of it. And this is something that maybe I can teach and maybe I can promote, being aware. But then I think people also kind of have to make as many mistakes and have as many experiences as possible so that they can get to the same point where I am. Not to the same, but to a similar point, maybe. A point where you just look at your life and all your experiences and you're just satisfied, and you feel like you've grown, and you feel like you've gone in a good direction. You can't just listen to this and think, okay, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to do this. Instead, I'm going to do that. I feel like, yeah, people should explore. Even if I say it's bad, even if I teach you that it's going to have negative consequences on you, I think you should still, make the experience and learn from it with the awareness that I'm giving.
That is the perfect way to end an episode of Unmapped, where we are all about the journey and exploration. Roxy, thank you so much for coming on the show. It has been an amazing conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's truly, for me, it's an honor when people give their time to come on and talk to me. And it's no different for you. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I have really enjoyed it as well. Really.
That's good. All right. Peace out, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into another installment of Unmapped. I really, really hope you enjoyed the episode. I always have a blast creating them, and it brings me so much joy to share them with you. As I said at the start, I'd really appreciate if you share, follow, and review the show if it feels right for you. I'd also like to thank my great mate Josh Ryan for the magic he makes in post-production, my studio partner Bondi Radio, and Arman at Moral Studios for the brand's design. I honestly could not do this by myself, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time, I'm Mike Kelly, and this has been Unmapped.